Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming to WMU. My name is Alexandra. I'm the Director of Cultural Affairs. And we are so thrilled to have Professor Alford here with us this evening. A little backstory about how we came to host Professor Serene Minoy from our nursing school met the professor at UNM and was intrigued by her story and the stories that she tells, and contacted me and let me know that she thought she would be a great distinguished speaker for our series. This is a series, in case anybody didn't know. We do 2 or 3 or 4 lectures a year. So she contacted me and we worked together with the School of Nursing. The professor gave a lecture this afternoon to nursing students. So we all worked together and we made this happen, and we're thrilled to have UNM Professor Deleso Alford.
Well, what a welcome, welcome, welcome. I am just honored to have been given the opportunity to, as you will see, I'm a law professor, so I unpack stuff. So I'm going to just be able to share with a group of individuals who are interested in her story. I just want to thank you for your time and attention, and just to give honor where honor is due. So, no further ado, I said I would pay attention to the clock back there, but it got a little vague. But it's okay, because then I remember I wear glasses. Now I can see it. Her story of Mrs. Henrietta Lacks and her HeLa cells immortalizing her legacy. Now, I do this often, so you are no different of an audience. I'm going to speak, but at some point you're going to hear that I'm from Louisiana. So if anybody's taking notes and I say sales, that's S-A-L-E-S. Yes, sales, HeLa sales. So don't worry, if I stop and slow myself down, you'll miss something. So I'm just going to speak. Here we are, and I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Please just take this brief survey so I can determine my existence in life. Now, before I get started, I also want to stop and to just give honor also to the veterans today, because veterans are a reason for us being able to be where we are in terms of being able to live in a land of free, right? And so I just want to make sure that I give that honor. I'm going to move forward. I have been talking about this for over 20 years, and so I'm glad that people are listening now. I've defined her stories as the unique and particularized lived inhumane experiences of marginalized women intersecting with healthcare and research. And I also want you all to understand that when I say her story, I am talking about those stories that have been undervalued, marginalized, dismissed, but for for times like this, we are able to inform history. I have 3 objectives, so hold me to them. 1, become familiar with the narrative of Mrs. Henrietta Lacks and her Gila cells. I refer to her as Mrs. Henrietta Lacks. I'm from the South. That's a person who is due the honor of being called Mrs. Henrietta Lacks. She was married and had 5 children at the time of 1951. So I just don't call her just call her Lacks. And her Gila cells. That's intentional, because the way that I unpack this, I want everyone to understand that there is ownership of the cells. I said it that time. Cells. The cells that are coming from her body, right? So they're her Gila cells. Define the remedy of unjust enrichment and its applicability to the Lacks family historical litigation. Now, this is where I come in as a law professor, writing about and deeming Mrs. Henrietta Lacks a person who is entitled to a remedy of unjust enrichment. And 3, to discuss the notion of health equity. And when you see me moving around up here, it is because I am a professor who likes to unpack, so I have stuff packed here. And I start out with my law review article. Well, I'm not going to start off with my law review article. I'm going to tell you the genesis of how this law review article that became integral in the litigation, how did it come to pass? Just by a show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks? Okay, great. I became familiar with the book at the same time, 2010, New York Times bestseller. I read the book as a law professor. I thought about it, and I thought that there was something that wasn't quite right about the closing of the book. When I say not quite right, what I mean is that there's a statement that the Lacks family did not have a claim. So I said to myself, that doesn't seem right. And I don't know about you, but we live in individual spaces, right? And so what I had to do is to be able to say, well, what can I do about that? I mean, the book is a New York Times bestseller. It did what it was supposed to do. It put it in what I'm going to talk about later, the court of public opinion. And so I had to operate from my space. I was a tenure track law professor, and as a law professor, I have duties, okay? Teaching, scholarship, and service. So I used my scholarly agenda to write a law review article and meet that standard. Well, it didn't meet it too well because I only had 6 downloads from the article. So, but I got it out of my system. And I want to encourage those of you who are pursuing education or writing, when you get the whisper is your whisper. And if you don't write it down and memorialize it, then that's on you. But I did it. You see? But I did it. And with that, I'm falling apart. Let's see. Got it. So with that, I did that. I wrote the article. In legal academia, it was not deemed long enough, lengthy enough, but I was mad, so I just wrote it. And it was 16 pages and short with sort of footnotes, and I almost didn't get tenure with the article. That's just to show you how tenuous someone's belief of you and what you're doing can be. Sometimes it takes people years to catch up with you. In my case, that's what it did. So I encourage you, write it down, memorialize it. So 2010, Rebecca Sloot wrote this book that put out in the universe in The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. 2012, I wrote this law review article. I attended a conference, and they were talking about unjust enrichment. And I'm going to break down and unpack what unjust enrichment is. But before I do that, in order to just level the playing field, I want to give you my introduction in the article to contextualize Henrietta Lacks. So, the title of my article is Gila Cells and Unjust Enrichment in the Human Body. Henrietta Lacks is buried in Clover, Virginia. She achieved fame and immortality in the world of science. In 1951, Johns Hopkins Hospital harvested the tissue of Mrs. Lax, a 31-year-old African-American woman diagnosed with cervical cancer, to mass produce HeLa cells. Now, HeLa, H-E-L-A, the first two letters of her first name, Henrietta, and the first two letters of her last name, Lax. So there was an intention for anonymity, right, to call it HeLa cells instead of her name. What does come to pass is that to disassociate HeLa cells from the human existence of the body that it came from was akin to treating Mrs. Lax as chattel property. What is born during the time of enslavement, what is born from that enslaved woman was the property of another. So the disassociation of that was what was one of the things that had to be talked about in the lawsuit. So in terms of who Mrs. Lax is and how I described her in my law review article, I said Mrs. Lax, race by social construction and gendered by biology, all mankind stood at the crossroads of public health circa 1951 in an apartheid state of reality in the United States and plowed back into medicine. When I said it was an apartheid state of reality, 1951, it was segregated wards, okay? And so the biological uniqueness of her cells allowed scientists and researchers to benefit society as a whole. Now, I think I'm a poet, so this is a poetic piece, hold yourself. In this essay, and I was really feeling myself, in this essay, I felt my strength. Writing can do that for you. If you feel strongly and passionate about something and write it, it may resonate with someone else. Okay. In this essay, I place Mrs. Lax Park's tissue cells back into her body to raise a claim of unjust enrichment. So I'm a visual learner, visual person. So when I said those words, what I intended to do was to imbue humanness to her, because the discussion and the use of her HeLa cells had disassociated Mrs. Lax. We needed a body, a personhood, in order to sue for a remedy. You with me? All right. Now the virtual people, I expect not to see them, but you, I see you. So, all right. So with that being said, from the onset, it was a calling to humanize Mrs. Lax, because the focus was on her cells. And in terms of humanizing her, I utilized the book, Rebecca Swift's book, and what is usually understated or not stated is the fact that in this particular article, I situated her claim as she signed an operation permit allowing Johns Hopkins to do what? To address her cervical cancer. What happened is that Johns Hopkins, through its physicians, acted within the scope of the express consent form. Oftentimes people say, well, they didn't get informed consent, but during that time period, there was a operation permit that she signed for the operation. Now, what I situate in this article is that the consent form was signed as it relates to putting Mrs. Lax under anesthesia for the radium cancer treatment to address her diagnosis of invasive cervical cancer. What I argue is that the interference of Henrietta's interests by the wrongful taking and transferring of tissue cells occurred when the surgeon on duty shaved 2 dime-sized pieces of tissue from Mrs. Lax's cervix, one from her tumor and one from the healthy cervical tissue, for research purposes, without her knowledge or consent. And my position in this article is that is the act scope of the operation permit that was signed by Mrs. Lax. Now, that was the practice of Johns Hopkins at that time. So, but when I put on, and I'll have to do this because I do, when I put on my her story lens, you caught that, right? I could see her story. During this time period of 1951, there was a practice of Johns Hopkins to inform women of the risk of infertility due to cervical cancer. The accepted treatment at that time was to insert radium rods inside the vagina. So there was a risk of infertility. I said that was their practice to inform women. The record reports that Johns Hopkins officials did not inform Mrs. Lax of the risk of infertility. And her medical report states that had she known, she would not have gone through with the treatment. And what I suggest in this article is that it appears that Mrs. Lax's denial of identity as a woman worthy of being warned of the potential inability to reproduce was overshadowed by her intersecting identity. She was identified as a poor southern tobacco farmer who worked the same land as her enslaved ancestors. That's from the book. So what we're doing here is understanding that she was more than that, okay? And the mere fact of denying her the opportunity to be informed about the risk of infertility is what I call adding insult to injury, because the injury was the taking. Now, and I'll refer back to my article, but what I want to do in terms of giving context to her story and who tells her story, in 2016, Oprah Winfrey has an HBO adaptation of the book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And so that is an HBO movie. And I probably stretched it out too far that you can't even identify who the people are, but that's Oprah holding the umbrella, okay? So just go with me. And what I'm suggesting is that somebody else told her story. Well, some of the Lax family members did not agree with the way the story was being told. So there's a book entitled The Untold Story by Mr. Ron Lax, who is the grandson of Henrietta Lacks. And what he stated is that in 2020, he wrote and published a memoir. And in this memoir, his book addresses inaccuracies that's reported in the book and the movie. And he states his side of the story in terms of understanding who Mrs. Lax was as a community leader, as a mother, as one who loved life, and she loved the color red. So he gave her a sense of autonomy, right, in coming together and saying, this is who she is. Now, what we're going to do, and the way that I've been able to utilize what my role is as a professor whose mission, I feel, is to immortalize her legacy, is to speak before people like yourselves and educational environments, from legal education and healthcare education, is to be able to say, let's talk about it. Let's unpack what happened to Mrs. Lax prior to the 2021 litigation. And so with that being said, I'm going to share HeLa cells. Oftentimes when we talk about the Henrietta Lacks and HeLa cells, I'm a visual person, so I was like, what does that look like? So as you can see, it's a beautiful piece of it. It's beautiful, and its impact is such that the HeLa cells are responsible for the polio vaccine, in vitro fertilization, gene mapping. If you have a COVID shot, HeLa cells regenerate every 24 hours. So what I said from the beginning is that these HeLa cells are such that they represent the first immortal human cell line. So think about it. Mrs. Lax died of cervical cancer in 1951, but her cells live on and they're regenerated, and we as a society benefit from them. So when I talk about the narrative of HeLa cells, I also look, ooh, yeah, that's right, that's what I wanted. That's 3D dimension, right? And so with that being said, I'm gonna move to what does this have to do with achieving health equity? So one of my objectives in terms of discussing the notion of health equity, I want to first unpack how do we get there. When we talk about social determinants of health, sometimes people often say you can determine a person's health by their zip code, where you live. Well, the social determinants of health or social drivers of health also tells us the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. So where you play, where you work, where you live can determine some inequities of whether or not you get the type of health care that you need. Health disparities, when we talk about it and kind of hone in on health disparities, it is the unjust differences in health. Okay, it can be improved by changes in human capital investments. How does infrastructure operate to make things better for all people, which gets us to health equity. Equal access to available care for equal need. Health equity, equal utilization of equal need, equal quality of care for all. If we were to go back to that time period where Mrs. Lax was engaging with the healthcare system, she did not receive health equity, right? She was not informed of something that was so vital to her bodily existence. And that is, for me, when I talk about past historical events, I often try to contextualize how much can you do about the past individually, but what you can do is about the present, particularly in the way that we operate with each other. So with that being said, I want to move to how did I find unjust enrichment as a principle that could give some type of justice to the Lax family. Now, like I said, I was 2012 law professor trying to write this article, short article. I went straight to the point. Benefit conferred. It was known in 1951 that her cells were able to live outside her body. So the benefit conferred was known. The awareness and appreciation or knowledge by the defendant of the benefit, Johns Hopkins researchers in 1951 went on television and said, in this vial, we have what could be the cure for cancer. So there was an awareness of it. Acceptance or retention of an inequitable benefit is such that they said, hey, these cells are here and we're going to use it. At that time, the thought is if you surrender your body to a public health care facility, then we, the healthcare system, can take anything we want. That is not the standard today, however it was. So with that being said, I set forth the unjust enrichment principle to say that the family deserved restitution. To put it simply, no one should benefit at the expense of another without restitution. It's just not fair, right? You work for something, it comes from you, and then you should benefit from it. And if you don't, then there's a fairness and equitable principle. There's that word equity again, right? There's a fairness and equitable principle, a remedy that is ready for one to say, let's take it to court, okay? And so with that being said, I like to speak of the court of public opinion. The man in the wheelchair is Mr. Lawrence Lax. He's one of the five children that Mrs. Lax had. He was the eldest child, and what I love when I tell about this story is that Mr. Lawrence Lax had the longest memory of who his mother was because she had 5, so she just had the youngest baby, so that baby had that child would have no recollection of a mother because she died. She's only 31 years old. But Mr. Lax was 16, and he would have the longest memory. So he was one of the voices to say, no, we will not allow her to be depicted. We don't want her to be depicted such as in the movie. Well, I like talking about this to say, and what can you do in your space? As a law professor, we took it to the court of public opinion. The Association of American Law Schools, when I say we, in the center, you point out, you have Mr. Ron Lax, who's next to me, and we have the attorney, Ben Crump, and we'll talk to, and the associate Chris, he's one of the associates for the Chris Seeger and Weiss, and you have the law professors, Doug Redelman and Caprice Roberts, who wrote about remedies. They wrote law books about remedies. And then you have Mr. Lawrence Lax, and that professor over there, that's me, Deleso. And so what we did was we compiled a panel, and we invited the family to the Association of American Law Schools to say, this is, HeLa cells came from a woman's body who had children. They exist. So then putting it in the court of public opinion made it real to people, right? It wasn't just HeLa cells. And so what I like telling about Mr. Lawrence Lax is when he found out that I wrote the law review article, he said, I'm so glad you're on my team. And he owned that. So when I talk to law students, I tell them, you have to be that kind of attorney. The kind of attorney that makes sure that your client knows that you are a part of his team. And when I talk to healthcare professionals, I said, you have to make sure that your patient knows that this is a team effort. That in order to address power imbalances, you have the power and the knowledge to address the imbalance. And when you do that, then it humanizes the experiences of the person that you're serving, okay? And so with that being said, we also we had an inaugural Henrietta Lacks Symposium, and with the Lacks descendants present. We went to another inaugural symposium, and I did not put the picture. We also went to the Association of American Medical Colleges to be able to talk to those individuals who were perhaps utilizing HeLa cells so that they would be aware. So the court of public opinion weighs heavily. There was also a Congressional Black Caucus nominated Henrietta Lacks for a posthumous Congressional Gold Medal for her contribution to modern medicine. So these are all ways of immortalizing her legacy. So this picture now is the court of law. And this is after a motion for dismiss was filed, after the hearing was, and I'm going to talk about that, but it was the Lacks family representatives sued Thermo Fisher Scientific, a multi-billion-dollar biotech company who utilized her cells. I said earlier, the principle of unjust enrichment, benefit conferred, the company knew that there was a benefit, the acceptance of the benefit, and I'll just tell you, where does a company suggest who it is to the world? On their website. So the attorneys were able to say, Your Honor, look at the website here. On the website it says, we use HeLa cells. But what? It was a disassociation from her body who has descendants who could sue for unjust enrichment, and they focused on, we use HeLa cells. HeLa cells has done such a great honor to the society. But in order to put her cells back into her body, and that's what happened in the court of law, because what the attorneys that filed the lawsuit, they filed the lawsuit in 2021. This is what I mean. Sometimes it takes people years to catch up with you. I needed one more person to cite to my article that was just lying around in 2012. But I have to admit, I was living in an individual silo. My individual interest was to meet my scholarly need. It didn't even dawn on me to send the article to the Lacks family, like, hey, you have a lawsuit. I was thinking individually. What I found is that if we work together, well, let me say it this way. As a society, we can no longer afford to operate in individual silos. with collaboration with attorneys. Attorney Ben Crump is a renowned civil rights attorney. Chris Seeger is a renowned mass torts attorney that could go up against a biotech company, and they utilize, which I'll just have to admit, I didn't realize that anybody was even thinking about the Henrietta Lacks case, because I filed in my individual silo, filed my lawsuit, I filed my article in academia, because that's where it was, on the shelf in academia, and I wasn't thinking about anything else until I saw Attorney Ben Crump on national TV in 2021 saying, we're going to sue for genetic injustice, and he was going on. I was like, we're talking about Henrietta Lacks. And being the introvert that I am, I picked up my cell phone, and I knew Attorney Ben Crump because he was president of the National Bar Association, and this is what I tell people that are navigating anything: do service. Service pays dividend. You may not see it at the moment, but just engaging in your organizational, aligning yourself with people who think like you is a good thing. So with the service, the law professors provided continuing legal education to the National Bar Association during his presidency. Well, that's what we do. And I met him, and for whatever reason I had his cell number, had no reason to call him from 2016 to 2021 until I saw him on national TV talking about Henrietta Lacks. So I texted him. I said, hi, this is Professor Deleso Alford. I wrote about this grave injustice in 2012. If you ever need a professional consultant, holler at your sister. And I never thought that he would call. I just wanted to get, I guess, I need to rethink. When I get a whisper, I need to know that something's gonna happen. But I got the whisper to write the article, I got the whisper to text him. He's not gonna respond. And that was October. But in January, I received an email from his co-counsel, from the Crump team co-counsel, saying, Professor Alford, would you be interested in writing an amicus brief? Amicus brief is friends of the court when you're in support of a position for our case. I thought it was a joke. It was on Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. I was like, who's playing on Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday? Nobody cites to my article. And at that point, I called Attorney Crump. I got my nerves, I called him. I said, is this? He said, yes, Professor. Talk to them. I was like, okay. So I called the person who wrote the email asking me to write an amicus brief, and I said, I have one question. Did you cite to that article that I wrote in 2012? And he said, Professor, your article is the catalyst for this lawsuit. It is the single count theory. And attorneys sue and throw everything but the kitchen sink in. For the young people, they stood on 10 toes. They said, we are bringing this lawsuit on behalf of the family under one theory, unjust enrichment. And Attorney Ben Crump cited to the federal court during that hearing, he cited to me, to the federal court, and said, Your Honor, we're here because Professor Deleso Alford wrote this article, Gila Cells and Unjust Enrichment, in 2012. He said it was marginalized. And I was like, okay, good, everybody knows that nobody cites to it. But he said, but just like Mrs. Henrietta Lacks' case, we will not continue what has occurred. And that's when I realized that acting on a whisper is more than just a personal obligation. It gave, that 2012 article gave the Lacks family a day in court. And Mr. Lacks I was there at this historical time, but I was on the other side watching it like I'm watching television. So then I knew anytime Ben Crump moves, I needed to be beside him so I could be a part of history. And so I was watching his hand go up, that's Mr. Lawrence Lacks, and afterwards I told Attorney Crump, I said, I don't know what made you do it, but I'm so glad you did, because it says he had his day in court, and that was for the motion to dismiss the case. So the way things worked out for this first lawsuit, now move on. Thermo Fisher, the lawsuit filed in 2021, it took 2 years. The judge heard both sides at the motion to dismiss hearing, and she asked them to mediate, and they did, 2 years. But for the civil rights attorney, being Crump, and the mass torts attorney, Chris Seeger, being big enough to withstand 2 years of litigation, we wouldn't be where we are right now. In 2023, the Lax family received a confidential agreement. Don't ask me how much, they wouldn't let me in the room. I did call Ben and I said, hey, you want me to come? He said, no, Professor. You don't have to. So the confidential agreement is between the family and Thermo Fisher Scientific, but it humanized Mrs. Henrietta Lacks because her cells were put back into her body and her descendants were able to raise that claim. And that happened on August 1st, 2023, which was the birthday of Mrs. Henrietta Lacks. So she would have been 102 years old. Now, with that being said, that happened on August 1st. Mr. Lawrence Lacks died 2 weeks later. And I want you to think about it in a sense of he fought a good fight. And he was 87 years old at that time. And just to know that, to be a part, that's what collaboration does. Taking this individual journey to combine and align with other people, and they be able to take it across the finish line. That's how society is going to be able to thrive, right? You all are taking time out of your schedules to come and hear me speak. I appreciate that. There are people virtually that are listening. I appreciate that. And together, we are immortalizing the legacy and honoring Mrs. Henrietta Lacks. But attorneys, after that, they were like, we're suing somebody else. Who we're going to sue next? So the next lawsuit was like a week later, Lacks versus Ultragenyx Pharmaceutical, which is another pharmaceutical company. Well, this lawsuit, and I'm gonna refer back to I'm gonna actually refer to the judge's response, because the lawsuit utilized the same principle, unjust enrichment, but against another defendant. Well, of course, the other side said, motion to dismiss. There's nothing here to see. Well, the judge, in a 76-page memorandum, how many pages? How many ways can you say, come see? That's what you say down south, come see. She denied their motion to dismiss. And I am just, in terms of why writing matters, they utilize everything that was said in the article in terms of the historical piece. And what I want to read to you all is the estate of Henrietta Lacks, represented by her grandson, Ron Lacks, claims these HeLa cells also have made some pharmaceutical companies a lot of money. Money rightly due Henrietta Lacks' family. On August 10, 2023, Lacks sued one of those companies, Ultragenyx Pharmaceutical, on a one-count complaint, right? And what is being said from that is that the judge said there's something to see here. And they're in discovery now, right now, this particular case, they're waiting to have a hearing. So there will be a day in court, we believe. A couple weeks later, there was another lawsuit filed against pharmaceutical companies. They're in discovery now. They're waiting to see what's going to happen, of course. But in all of that, in terms of humanizing Mrs. Henrietta Lacks, it made me think deeply about how to write your own present history in your own way, okay? I'm not able to go file the lawsuit as the attorney of this lawsuit, but I was able to utilize where I am and where I stand to be a conduit, right? And so with that being said, thank you for helping me and the Lacks family to honor Mrs. Henrietta Lacks by immortalizing her legacy. this is one step of many to think of her as a human being. I like this particular image. Is you have to attribute it to my communications person. I was trying to say to her, the conversation and the discourse is about HeLa cells. But what I'd like for people to remember is that the body, the existence of Mrs. Henrietta Lacks is present always. And so I had a moment in which I had to, I was asked to speak to during research day of some biomedical researchers. And so I immediately had to really think deeply about what will I tell the people who are utilizing HeLa cells. And I didn't sleep the night before because I'm like, what do I say? And in 2 words I said the next day, thank you. Thank you for utilizing the HeLa cells for medical advancement. What we're talking about with the historical litigation is for those individual entities and institutions that are benefiting and profiting unjustly. So those are 2 different people and 2 different entities and 2 different interests. That was just my moment that I had to say thank you for doing what you can do, and that is find medical advancements. So with that being said, before we open up for questions and answers, I'm going to ask you one more time to prove my existence as to why I exist, and take this brief survey, and we're going to just talk if you'd like to.
Are we ready to take some questions?
Is everyone through with the code? All right, I'm just going to put this up here on behalf of UNM and the committee. Thank you. Telling her stories to inform history, and you are a part of the history that's in the making. So thank you. I appreciate your time and attention. Hopefully, I didn't waste your time tonight. Okay, so then you have to talk to me. All right. So you ask the question, and it doesn't have to be a question. It could be a comment, an epiphany, a revelation. Because this show is on the road. Okay. The train has left the station. I am like, how in my lifetime can I be a part of something bigger than myself? And the mere idea of the phenomenal woman that, and we still can't explain it. Like, why does her cells, why is she the person? We don't know. But what we do know is that we can honor her as a human being and attribute to her that the honor that's due. So, yes. Oh, now you're gonna make me feel like Oprah Winfrey or somebody.
Thank you, Oprah.
No, I have to brand my name, Deleso. Yeah, Deleso.
Thank you, Deleso.
Yes.
For a former English teacher, what makes her cells so special in layman's terms?
In the attorney science does not know. Because if they did, they would duplicate it in some kind of way. The HeLa cells are unique, and that's why this particular litigation is so unique. Because everybody whose cells are taken, there are cases which will say you have no right to cells because that's waste. But this one was so different because we could trace the advancements made from the cells and the profit. But science does not know what made her cell so phenomenal. But we do know her identity, her anonymity was tried to hide behind it. But I just believe the family, her descendants, are deserving of some restitution, whatever. They deserve something. And that was brought out in the, I didn't go deeply in the, I didn't want to put you all to sleep, but I didn't want to put you to sleep, but in the hearing, it was an effort to express to the court that this case was also about generational wealth, right? Because if you deny the bodily existence of the conduit, then you deny the descendants. And so it had to be, her personhood had to be situated in such a way that it was understood that this was bigger than just her cells being taken. It's the profit. It was also, do we really believe that unjust enrichment is a viable claim to Mrs. Lax, right? In her lived experience and lived body. That's what I'm thinking.
So, what happens going forward with those people that are still using her cells? Are they going to have to, is something going to be established so that these lawsuits don't have to keep being?
That's the hope. That's the hope. The hope is that
Who
the
decides
institutions, with the courts and the mediation and those individuals that are talking to, see, once the confidential agreement was reached by Thermo Fisher, that was a big acknowledgement of humanity. I'm going to say it was an acknowledgement of dignity of the process to say we will do what we're doing. Now, as it relates to the other entities that are out there, the hope is that they will all come together, that somebody will come together and decide what can we do for the family. Because the cells are everywhere, so everybody can't be sued. So that's when you have to really think about what is fair and righteous, you know, in terms of the individuals with the power to do so. Those defendants that are being sued have the power to come together and say, let's think about this. How deeply can we do? As stated earlier, they don't let me in those rooms. If they let me in the room, I'd be able to tell you. But my thinking is that there is some discussion, deep discussions, as to how can we make them whole. And what I realize is that the good that comes out of HeLa cells research, it has to be balanced. And that's why when I had the opportunity to speak to biomedical researchers, I said, thank you. I don't want you to shy away from utilizing the cells that are advancing health in society. So something has to be done. That's why I also believe this is a historical. You see that? You with me? That's why they're gonna call it Deleso. No, just kidding. There's a historical accounting that is developing, right? And it's not just what happened today. It's a continuum of what happened in the past. And how do you utilize that past to make a better present? And that was my goal. My goal was to utilize, for my scholarship to be in practical application. What does that mean? If I have an opportunity like today to speak to a classroom, a nursing classroom, and those learners, that next generation of culturally competent professionals who practice cultural humility by knowing the story of Mrs. Henrietta Lacks, that breeds a foundation for a different type of healthcare professional. Not the ones of the past, but the ones of the present. And I'll just share with you the energy and the feedback that I received from the classroom, it inspired me to keep going. Because now I know that we are writing a present history, and one day somebody's going to read about us. And that is such an awesome responsibility. And I always want to be found aligning myself with people who are doing the right things, that are thinking about it rightly. I had to check myself. I'm talking about her cells were taken without permission or consent, and something needs to be done. And then I had to face myself when the people who were doing the right things for the right reasons, then I had to say, thank you for doing that. So you can do both and. That's what I came up with. She has the mic. Now don't let me get so excited that I jump off of here, then we have a bad story, like how she came. I need to stay back here.
We got a lot of nurses in the room.
Oh, I can get some help. And I see my nurses in training back there too, so you better rush up here too. You better rush up here.
Well, two things you said resonated with me. The first was about academia, and you were in your little silo, working on your article.
Put the mic, because you said some good stuff right now.
Working on your article, and not thinking about the broader world, and so you were just in, which so much of research in academia is about just my work and how it's going to impact me and move me forward, but you had this critical piece of information and you weren't even aware of it because you were in that little world. So kudos for realizing that.
Thank you.
The importance of your work and how it can impact society, which to me, research without that is useless. So that was the first thing, and then thanking the biomedical folks. That was brilliant, because what they're doing is good work.
Yes.
But we can't do the good work that we have to acknowledge
That was the
where
point.
that
Yes.
material
Yes.
comes from a human being, and we have to bring to awareness the injustices that are done to get some medical advancements. And Henrietta Lacks was one instance of where that happened. There's a lot more that has happened that people are not aware of the inequities in medicine and why some groups do not trust the medical profession and all that because of how some groups have been treated without their consent and used for medical advancement. So, yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the point of the biomedical researchers, was to acknowledge, because they are human beings too, and just to be, and the Lacks family is also on board with. Do you know how phenomenal it is to have that ancestral linkage and to be able to know that polio, in vitro fertilization, gene mapping, and other advancements. It's the foundation. These HeLa cells are the foundation for so much. They don't want that to stop, but the recognition that there's a remedy for it and the acknowledgement. So that was my it. Yes.
I was a long-time head of a medical provision clinic, and one of the things that strikes me so much about this story is the confidence that the African American community has in medicine. One of the things we dealt with was AIDS and sexually transmitted diseases. And many times we would go up against the Tuskegee experiment, and there was no confidence. So we really had to work to gain that. And I'm wondering if her story is carrying on the same thing among various communities in our country, that there is no lack of confidence because of this.
Yes. What I have found is that there is a definite need to be able to evoke trustworthiness to people who have been victims of systems. And so what one of my goals for this mission of being able, because I also talk about Tuskegee, my nurses are going to hold me to the fire. I'm writing a book called The Forgotten Women, The Untold Side of the U.S. Public Health Service Syphilis Study at Tuskegee, because syphilis is a sexually transmitted disease. And all of our historical accounting, we don't think about the women. And so back 2000, another law review article. See, I was on the tenure track, and I was saying everything I wanted to say. And if you take that article was written 2011, I wrote it, I said it. Now I have to write the book. It's 2026. It still is true. When I'm talking to healthcare professionals, we don't even talk about the women. And I just did some research, and that has to be talked about. Why? Particularly to the current, next generation, because then we think about trying to talk about being patient-centered, and if we don't realize that the historical accounting of the U.S. Public Health Service syphilis study at Tuskegee denies the existence of the harm, the direct harm for women and congenital syphilis for the children. That is another marginalization. That's what you refer to. It's replete with, history is replete. But if we, and this is my calling, so I'm sorry, integrate it into the curriculum, we can level the playing field. Someone told me you're either comfortable or curious. But if you have a classroom of both comfortable and curious, and you have a her story or her stories that you can interweave into competencies, because healthcare education really understands competencies, right? A checklist. But if we utilize education in a way that empowers people and allows us to really think about it, even when I say the women of Tuskegee, every time I say it, people are like, yeah, we don't talk about it. I gotta go write a book, okay? I'll see y'all later. So, I do. I mean, that was 2011, another tenure track. You know, he better relax. But as the UNM Humanity Matters visiting professor, I'm living out my dream, because I'm able to talk to healthcare professionals about these types of stories. OBGYN, the medical specialist of gynecology, US gynecology, is attributed to the father of gynecology. But my article, another article for the tenure track, was about what about the women? And Narcolepsy and Lucy, the enslaved bodies that were used. And in his memoir, Dr. Sam's memoir, he states their names. So by invoking that her story, what I've been able to do is to explore professionalism through the lens of those stories. You get your accreditation rate of professionalism, but you also get a knowledge and a building of this happened, but what am I going to do now to prevent it? And I think that when we encourage this generation of professionals to understand what empathy is, then we can convey the need for trust, right? And not be in denial, like, why you should just take these 2 pills, because I said take the 2 pills. It was like, no, what's in those 2 pills? But we need to deal with that. So thank you. This is an area, because what I'm going to have to do with this eventually is to promote research amongst communities that don't trust the research. How do you have research about anything without having that population to surrender their bodies to the process? So it's a deep, it's layers, right? But we only can do what we do in our, together, because the individual silo does not work. I would still have 7 downloads. if by service, I'm talking to the young people, by service, being able to take someone in position to bring a lawsuit, that was me doing service. would claim. It also took a judge, a federal judge, to be in position to listen, to say there's something here. So it's togetherness, right?
Thank you so much for all this information that you've imparted to us, and to me it's always wonderful to see somebody who is not only pursuing knowledge, but knowledge with a passion. So thank you. One thing I just like to observe, because I see a lot of people are my age, and so you've been to doctors a lot, and you might have had a few procedures done, and I see a lot of young people, so you probably haven't had that many yet. I'm not trying to remember, but it seems like it's within the last 20 or 15 years, where now if you go to have a procedure, there's a lot of stuff you have to read. And I remember when I had I think it was my knee replaced, and we might want to use some of your tissues for research and so forth and so on and everything. And being scientifically trained, of course I said, oh, well, it's so nice that they asked. I could check yes or no. And I said, of course I'll let you use my cells, because of course if I want to engender more knowledge and research. I'm so glad that now, I don't know if it's because of the HeLa cells and Mrs. Lax and her family, but it's nice now that they bothered to ask.
Yes. And there's also concern amongst individuals thinking about it. Even when you're at that moment, your purpose is to get that knee replaced, right? And I'll sign anything to get this knee replaced. Is that really, willing? You have to balance it. So we grapple with those issues, but thank you for acknowledging the fact that at least your personal autonomy is being respected. Ask me, right? And I can say yes or I can say no. I'm gonna say yes because my knee hurt, right? But at least you ask, right? And so that's good. I had adult acne, and the side effects that was going to happen, I was like, okay, but I need this off my face. So I was like, yes, and I took the chance that would happen or not. So we do that. Hi.
I was just wondering if there were any future plans for another Henrietta Lacks Symposium or something similar in the future that someone could attend?
Well, you're talking to I think we should give the mic to the administration then. Put her on the spot. Give her the mic and see does she see any reason to bring me back.
I'll take you back any.
Yes, and I'm currently at UNM, and there is plans underway, and so we'll definitely be in contact. Actually, and I told you, I am going to do a November 20th a session on, and they've got CME credits, so you tell your people, and it's entitled Exploring Cultural Humility Through the Lens of Mrs. Henrietta Lacks, and it's hybrid. So you don't have to go drive to Albuquerque or fly like I did. I flew here. And so I'll make sure that you all get the link. I don't know if it was a sign in or anything, or any way that, especially look, I gotta keep my people together. So you need to know if you want to hear, because every time I tell a different aspect of it. But this one I wanted to just kind of put out there what was happening currently. But I'm going to have a framework for the notion of cultural humility, and it's going to be hybrid. So we'll make sure that you get it. All right, Serene.
That sounds wonderful.
Serene is responsible. If you don't get the link, it is all her fault.
Maybe the second sentence I said to Dr. Alford was, "You are my hero." So yeah, we'll definitely love.
So how would these people get notified of the link?
We have a sign-up sheet on.
Oh, there was a sign-up sheet. Okay.
If you didn't notice it on your way in, it's still there.
Okay.
It's the cultural affairs sign-in sheet, but I'm sure that we could send out.
We are a team now. We work together. Individuals sign
Socorro Rico here, she runs the place. So, but among us, and Charnel, one of our professors, we can all work together to have you back because you taught us so much, you know, like you say about the
Don't make me
silos.
cry or don't make me jump over
No,
this
don't
thing.
jump, don't jump.
I got
Although those are cool shoes. But the thing is that you've taught us also ethics, and as nurses we want to honor ethics and also think outside of ourselves. And like you said before, you have to check yourself.
Mhm.
So you're helping us to do that as well because we can get so used to our own thinking and to have somebody come in and say, well, let's think this way. How about this? We appreciate it for sure. So thank you. We'll have you back.
Thank you. And I'm going to come closer. I begin to come closer to the weekend so I can see some stuff. It's beautiful here. I really appreciate it. I appreciate it so.
We take a couple more questions and then we'll. Well, this has brought up a question for me about all the genetic testing that's being done, that people are sending their blood samples off to 123andMe and Ancestry because they want information, but those blood samples then belong to those companies. Then the company gets sold or not. And nobody seems to care. I mean, everybody just wants to know what their background is. I've held back because it's like you're giving yourself. These people are not paying for it. I don't think that there should be a monetary thing about it anyway. But this is such a big topic. I mean, it's like Henrietta Lacks cells. I mean, people are giving their cells away to these companies. I don't know if anything's being done about that, but anyway, that's my question.
I cannot answer that. I'm going to stay in my lane, but I hear everything you said, and it is a concern of many as to what are people doing with the information beyond that. It's usually a disclaimer, like, you want this, so you're going to give me everything. We need to examine that, you know. That's what I'm saying. But thank you.
But you can't do it if you can't get the answer if you say no.
Right? And how voluntary is that, right?
Well, for like people of color, and I've experienced medical issues where they didn't take me seriously, we go online and we give our data so we can actually treat ourselves. There are companies that take your genetic information and tell you what you're more predisposed to, so now you have something to tell the doctor to listen to you. A lot of the times they don't take into consideration that, different ethnic bodies. And I think to help that would, instead of trying to trust and empathy, maybe putting more people of color in these doctor positions, maybe encouraging more women, maybe encouraging more of us to try to become doctors and help ourselves and each other,
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. That was huge.
Okay, we'll take one more question.
I want to personally, from my heart, honor you for all of us who have been treated humanely. You elevate us. Thank you.
See, you better make me come back now. I made friends on the little small plane. I was like, oh, wow, this is great. So thank you so much. I have a gift for you. I forgot, and I had to look it up really quickly. I did tell you I was a poet, and you didn't even know it, right? I think about things in prose first, and then I unpack them. So in honor of Mrs. Lack's birthday, I wrote, and it was published in an article, a newspaper article, telling her story to inform history. His story called you out your name. In 1951 and beyond, with pseudonyms like Helen Lane and Helen Larson, with neither regret nor shame, intentionally hiding your human existence in a vial, as if it were possible to disassociate you from your own cells, desperately trying to dim your light and love for the color red, not for a moment, but for a while. The plan was to take your cells without leaving a trace behind. The audacity of them to call you Gila, only to have to recognize that you are our mother of modern medicine, the first human cell line and healer of all mankind. Yet another story revealing the dehumanization of a Black woman just waiting to be told. Past created legal fictions that bore babies akin to human crop. Present biotech and pharmaceutical companies using your cells without permission or consent. Both taken for value, placed in and on the market to be bought and sold. Her story, place your cells back into your body to raise a claim for unjust enrichment in pursuit of dignity, respect, humanity, and the ultimate good. Incalculable medical advancements for society's sake, as only the manifestation of justice delayed can now be understood. Thank you.